When I wrote jokes for KVN, first of all, you go out there and you quickly realize that everyone here is deeply into comedy. So you are certainly not alone. And you're like, oh, this is really interesting. It's like some kind of multiverse where everyone is a comedian. Wow. So everyone here has a sense of humor. There are no outsiders here. There's no one here who won't get your joke. These people will go deep into the joke, and you're like, wow, well, I like it here, and you end up staying. There are painful topics because stand-up is about time. Pain plus time is the formula for stand-up. And now it's like, what exactly are you all doing here, young kids, 18 years old and above, seriously? So are we truly discussing the topic of COVID-19 now? When was that already? What COVID? Someone really has to genuinely try to break through to this particular person.
Hello, I'm Nicholas Sisky, and this is Archetype of the Nation, a cultural project that explores the foundations of Ukrainian national identity. Who we were, who we've become, who we should and can be. We look for the answer in folklore as well as in conversations with outstanding representatives of our nation. Today our guest is stand-up comedian, screenwriter and producer Nataly Haripova. Hello Natalia, good afternoon. Each episode of our project is dedicated to a certain value characteristic of the Ukrainian nation. And today's episode is devoted to a topic that's close to you. It's the sense of humor, specifically Ukrainian humor. As we prepare for each episode, we analyze folklore, and our folklorist Marina Demediuk writes short, popular science essays about how a particular value is represented in Ukrainian folklore. And now I'll quote one for you. A certain idea that we have formulated. A sense of humor is deeply rooted in folk culture and is manifested in all folklore genres. From short anecdotal stories to folk humorous songs and fairy tales, as well as in everyday life and rituals. The phenomenon of Ukrainian humor is a unique and dynamic cultural phenomenon that combines tradition and innovation. Natalia, what does humor mean to you?
For me, it's actually a kind of way of being. For me, humor is a way to express what I really think, what I really like or really dislike. It's a way to relieve tension. It was a survival mechanism for me as a child, for example, in difficult family relationships. And it has stayed with me because I can use humor to smooth things over circumstances. Plus, for me, humor is my profession because I have been working professionally with humor all my life. And that's basically what my entire sense of closeness and connection with other people is truly built upon. And in general, this really applies to my whole entire day. I mean, if I can't genuinely laugh with anyone at all during the course of the day, for example, if I'm completely home alone and isolated, and if, for example, I haven't watched any comedy at all today, if I haven't genuinely laughed with anyone, I really start to feel like something is profoundly wrong, like something isn't quite going according to my carefully laid plan, because I always need to exchange amusing jokes, to exchange positive energy, and to playfully joke around. It's truly like breathing, an essential part of my very existence for me. And if I freeze up in this even a little, I immediately get a kind of setback. It feels like something truly scary is rapidly approaching, and so on and so forth.
How did this sense of humor show itself in your childhood? And did you make others laugh more, or did you laugh yourself? How did it happen?
Well, for example, right now I can truly compare my own child's childhood experiences to my very own childhood. I see that for my child, this sense of humor isn't about survival, it's just for enjoyment. Because she makes me laugh a lot, and laughs a lot herself. For example, right now we're riding in a taxi, and she says she's made the 4th taxi driver laugh. So it's important for her to make people laugh, because she sees that I do it, and she thinks that's how everyone lives. She thinks everyone has a sense of humor. And for me, it was a little different. Actually, I didn't joke around much as a child. And I think that, on the contrary, it was a profound childhood trauma that truly made me start to smooth things over. And that's precisely when a touch of well-placed humor truly came to the rescue, effectively diffusing the tension. So, through various experiences, I profoundly realized that a well-placed joke can effectively save many different challenging and awkward situations. Well, and of course, we actively took part in various clubs. We had KVN, which is a popular comedy game, plus there were some ecological contests specifically for environmental teams. And I was there as a scriptwriter, indeed, as the main one. And we came up with creative ways to present the crucial idea that trees absolutely need to be planted. And for some reason, I always thought, this just came to me as a child, that you need to add a joke. That is, when you add jokes, people will pay attention and start listening. But if you just say that trees need to be planted, no one will listen. And in fact, somehow, intuitively, I came to this conclusion myself, but that's really how it is. For example, if you listen to TED Talks now about how to present yourself or how to present an idea, the first thing you need to do is focus on yourself, like making a joke. You immediately win over the audience, relieve the tension, and so on. Back then, it was quite intuitive. Even when I wrote essays, I always included jokes. Basically, I would rewrite essays from a book, but I would insert jokes in such a way as not to lose the audience. And now I truly realized that I was doing it for a very specific reason, but somehow it all genuinely came together, so that at some significant point, I fully realized I could indeed write jokes. I thoroughly enjoy it. I absolutely love it, and I feel completely in the flow when I am writing jokes, which profoundly means this is definitely, without a doubt, my true path.
And when exactly did you first truly feel that moment when you could make an entire audience laugh? Not just one single person, but the whole entire room?
Well, again, we used to have these wonderful ecological expeditions, and during those memorable expeditions, every single evening we would have some kind of special event around the warm campfire. And there we would often tell captivating stories or put on entertaining little skits. And that genuine laughter, I really truly liked it. It's like when you hear such joyful laughter, it genuinely means people truly like you. And that's the profound trauma of all comedians. We all truly need to be liked. And this trauma helped me genuinely realize that I quite enjoy it when people laugh. It's interesting indeed. And then with every performance, you gradually add more laughter, more and more, building upon each success. And eventually, it truly leads you somewhere significant and meaningful. So for me, it all started with KVN. When I wrote my very first jokes for KVN, you go out there and truly realize that absolutely everyone here is quite into humor. So you're not alone, and you're like, wow, this is really interesting. It's like some kind of multiverse where everyone's a comedian. Wow, everyone here genuinely has a sense of humor. There are no outsiders. There's no one who won't completely get your joke. These people will indeed go deep into the joke, and you're like, whoa, I really, really like it here. And so you ultimately end up staying. After that initial experience, there were all sorts of different combinations and arrangements. Like, I worked by myself. At first, I was on a team, then we had various comedy projects. Then I truly realized that I really enjoy making jokes completely on my own, when I don't have to coordinate my comedic jokes with anyone else at all. That is, I really know myself how the joke should go. And if there's someone else, they might get in my way. I'll genuinely worry about that particular person, about precisely how they'll manage to do it. But when it truly comes to myself, well, I just don't know. I only worry about myself. If I mess up, it's just me. There's no one else to blame. Only you. And then at that point, I started writing jokes myself. And then I truly realized there's stand-up comedy, where people genuinely joke about their very own thoughts and personal experiences. You absolutely do not need a specific character for that particular type of performance. Before, I used to joke in character. Back then, there was still V-Contact, and I used to post various different ironic thoughts, and they would get some likes, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. But who would would actually pay me for this kind of thing? These are just thoughts with irony. Where do you even put them? There are all sorts of TV formats, but there you specifically need punchline jokes, direct and pretty simple ones. You really have to genuinely grow into that particular kind of subtle understanding. But everything worked out wonderfully for me, thank God. Stand-up comedy appeared, and that particular genre finally made its way to Ukraine. And there I was truly living, just completely immersed in my own creative ecosystem, thinking deeply about what I genuinely wanted to talk about, what I truly needed to share with people, what deeply hurt me, what I can't cope with, and so on. And all of that was in my stand-up. And all of that really became my primary way of expressing myself, the most significant one in actual fact.
The Archetype of the Nation is created with the support of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation and is released in various formats. So choose the one you like best. Listen, watch and read our episodes, and also share your thoughts in the comments, because in this project every opinion matters. And of course, subscribe to our channels and pages so you don't miss anything interesting. All the links are in the description for this episode. You've been in stand-up and comedy in general for quite a long time now. What topics, and in
Life, a considerably long time.
are there topics or characters that never get old and always work? Can you draw any conclusions about that?
Characters?
Or topics? The ones that are always funny, always resonate with the audience.
Relationships are always a topic. Like everyone has relationships. Some people want to fall in love, some are in love, some are already tired of loving. Almost everyone has kids. Well, that's just how it is. When the target audience is older, everyone has kids. That's always interesting too. And, of course, the really important and main questions that truly concern many people. For example, if it's, let's say, a woman, it is always funny indeed when she's starting to reflect on how she looks, trends, some kind of spiritual trends, practices, or something else. When all of this is filtered through a kind of reflection and humor, it's always very interesting. It's the same with men. They too have their own compelling stories. And what truly interests everyone are the underlying meanings, what fundamentally forms our foundation, and thoughtful reflections on significant things like, for example, democracy.
Love of freedom?
Love of freedom, I don't know how often people actually discuss it, but there are certain stories that people find interesting to mull over, like the relationships between countries, the past, the future, things like that, the kinds of topics people actually talk about in their kitchens. Stand-up should be about things people talk about, but sometimes are afraid to say out loud. For example, stand-up should always be a little bit on the edge. First of all, it's on the edge for you because you have to be super honest with yourself. And for example, my very first stand-up comedy routine was specifically about the undeniable fact that I personally didn't truly feel sexy at all. However, a great many people simply cannot bring themselves to say out loud, openly and honestly, that they genuinely do not feel sexy. They often hide this significant feeling from themselves deep down inside. Or for example, in my latest stand-up performance, I extensively talk about the complexities of libido during the war, and also about being in a committed relationship for 10 whole years, discussing various things like modern kids, for example. That is, in reality, we can't really say these things to children in our everyday lives, but in stand-up, we can actually talk about it, because we genuinely feel it. We feel this change that our children, so to speak, are overwhelmed by our love. We're so afraid of causing them the same traumas we had, so we love them so much that maybe this will also become a trauma for them, one they'll have to work through themselves and talk about in their own stand-up routines.
Are there topics you think shouldn't be joked about?
Well, sensitive topics and subjects that a person genuinely has no personal connection to. That is, it very often happens, for example, when someone is not actually in the military service, but nevertheless jokes about what is truly happening in a war situation. Especially with those in the military, it becomes immediately and abundantly clear that such behavior should absolutely not be tolerated or expressed in that manner. Because if you're not at war, if you're a civilian, then you should joke about civilian things. About things that relate to your life, specifically yours. Because stand-up is stand-up about yourself. Because it's always a judgment about someone you have no connection to. There are also painful topics. Because stand-up is time, pain plus time, that's the formula for stand-up. When the pain passes, for example, when the planes crashed into the Twin Towers on September 11th, no one could have imagined that people would ever joke about it. But now we see it in The Simpsons and everywhere else, and among stand-up comedians. There are jokes about September 11th because the time has come. The time has come, we all need to rethink it, that is, to accept it, to live through this pain, and to come out of it as a winner. And who is the winner? The one who overcomes, who is above. And being above is when you've already made a joke about it. So, we'll joke about the war too, but only when it ends and some time has passed. Right now, we can only joke about what we're experiencing at this moment, during the war, and specifically you. That's it. Well, for example, let's consider this, for instance. If someone in my family is sick with some illness, I can joke about it. If not, then I can't, because that's my pain. And I'm joking about myself. If I just suddenly start joking about some serious illness, then why all of a sudden would I do that? And it becomes quite painful for other people who have perhaps joked about it in the past. But if I joke about this particular illness and someone very close in my family actually has it, like for example my own dear dad had cancer, I can certainly joke about it because that's my personal relationship with my dad. And maybe, just maybe, it will make it a little bit easier for someone else, that you can actually openly joke about it. Because, again, it relieves the tension. And there's a high level of tension, especially when it comes to illness. In my opinion, that's really the main thing you shouldn't joke about at all.
Is the ability to joke about yourself strength? Do you need to be strong to joke about yourself? You do.
You need to have confidence. In general, over time, I realized that if there are indeed people around me whom I absolutely cannot joke about, then that particular person is no longer truly my person, you see. That is, I'm already ending the relationship with them in some way, because the level of tension between us is such that I can't joke. In other words, this person will get offended. So this is not a very mature person and doesn't really share my values. We're slowly saying goodbye to each other. In the same way, I constantly joke about myself, and basically, my show is like that. It's an hour and a half of jokes specifically about my life, about my child, about my family, everything that concerns me. So, of course, it is clear that self-irony is a very powerful and significant thing. And if a person truly doesn't have self-irony, it genuinely means there's a lot of inner work that needs to be done.
In general, Ukrainian folklore is characterized by the fact that our humor and our jokes are usually quite self-ironic.
Yes. Well, yes, and actually, for example, songs, lewd songs, they really show how easily Ukrainians actually treated everything related to sexuality, to kissing, petting, and so on and so on. It was so easy back then, in the past, that's why it was reflected in these songs. But now it's like, hush, what's going on there? Kids, 18 plus or whatever, something like that. But before it was, kind of just a part of our existence. So how can you hide this or, not allow people to even think about it until they're 18? Even though, for example, arousal in children can appear as early as 10 years old, for instance. So what are they supposed to do with it until they're 18? So basically just hide it, think it's shameful. But in Ukrainian folklore, there were so many of these songs. For example, my friend Dmytro Mazuryak from the band Kaska, who is now part of the cultural landing team, he can sing these songs for 10 hours straight, and not a single one will repeat. That's how many wonderful songs we currently have, and they are all just absolutely fantastic, and that's super cool indeed. This also effectively relieves all the tension and pressure around producing this particular topic. That's it, really.
At one time, you became the first among Ukrainian stand-up comedians to organize your own tour.
Yes.
What was the impetus for this at the time?
Well, basically, at that particular time, it was abundantly clear that I had sufficient material. And back then, you see, I had these managers who were Jewish. Their common nickname was the Jews, the Volkovintsev brothers. And we organized a big concert for me. At that time, no one was doing solo concerts yet. At first, we didn't even see it as a solo show. There was a lot of material, hours of material. So we thought, let's just do it and record it on camera. We did it, recorded it on camera, and then thought, well, what's the problem? Like, I could perform in all the places where I had already performed as a headliner for 15 minutes, but now do a whole hour. Well, maybe it was not a full hour, maybe it was 50 minutes of material. Man, those were such cool ideas. And that's when we decided to do this tour. And I remember that at the time, no one was really doing anything like that. There was a tour preview. It was like a video, a truly funny, quite super pretentious, rather over-the-top video that announced the entire tour. We shot it in a studio with cameras on dollies and all the actual necessary stuff. These were all my dedicated friends who just chipped in, the cameraman. One brought the camera, another had the dolly, someone else had the studio. And that's how we shot it. All my girlfriends were in it with me. We did makeup, wore costumes, and so on. And it turned out to be a really cool video for that tour. And so that was in fact the first tour.
Do you remember any of your performances that you consider unsuccessful? And what did you take away from it for yourself?
Well, unsuccessful ones, well, of course, there were some. Mostly it happened at corporate events, because corporate gigs are really not the place for stand-up, but comedians go there because it's money. Since, basically, you don't get paid that much for comedy when you perform. There are 5 comedians, you come to a bar, you perform, and they give you 2,000 or 3,000 hryvnias. I mean, for me, 2,000 hryvnias is just enough to get there and back by taxi to the village where I live now. So, in fact, you need corporate gigs. At corporate gigs, they pay real money, but they're very difficult because at corporate events, people come to celebrate their own occasion. Something personal? If it's colleagues, then finally everyone is drunk and they're interested in who will leave and they don't care at all what's happening on stage. The same goes for where there are weddings, birthdays, anywhere there's alcohol. People are no longer interested in spoken word performances. If it's not some kind of spoken genre that hypes people up, but just telling stories about my life, who cares about that at a corporate party? The best corporate gigs were bachelorette parties. Stand-up at bachelorette parties is just super easy. I really love women. I really love being in women's circles. It's very easy for me to work with women. So, it's great. I adore bachelorette parties. They're awesome. Honestly, I don't really like all the other corporate gigs that much.
By the way, what do you think about the idea that audiences are more skeptical toward female comedians than male ones? Is that really the case?
Well, I think that's not really the case anymore. It was like that at the beginning when I was just starting out. And back then, yes, it was true. Back then, it was like, now a girl is coming on stage. And they would basically hide the girl somewhere. When they were setting up the lineup, it was guy, guy, guy. And then, okay, We can put a girl here, that's when people will go out for a smoke. And then, after that, it was guy again. Now that's not the case at all. Now, for example, Lera Manzuk draws crowds. Zhovtnevi, Nastya Zukvala, she has tours across Europe and Ukraine with packed venues. There are a bunch of girls who are already performing now, and many more will come, and they'll come not from a weak position, but from a strong one. For example, I just announced a material tryout featuring Nastya Korotka, Dasha Bilotserkovets, and Ina Hardieva, and all the tickets were sold out in 7 minutes, and only girls will be performing. Well, according to the logline, you can't even truly compare. And in general, stand-up comedy is the kind of thing that's judged solely by whether it's genuinely funny or not. It doesn't matter at all if it's a boy or a girl, whoever, even a dog, it doesn't matter at all. The main thing is that it's funny. I don't think there's any kind of overkill right now.
I mean, the situation with gender balance has already gotten better.
Yeah, that's true. And we made that happen. Those of us who started out, the first girls in stand-up.
Can humor be funny but toxic? The kind that destroys?
Of course. Humor is aggression, really. Humor is aggression, and sometimes it's balanced and sometimes it goes too far. If there's passive aggression, it's very easy to wrap passive aggression into a joke. It's not always pleasant to hear, for example. There are pure jokes, kind jokes. For example, Vasha Baidak's jokes. He has a kind, clean stand-up. Thank God at least he started swearing a bit. Otherwise, he could have already been canonized as a saint or something. But well, Vasha's genre is very difficult because it's pure, kind stand-up. Kind humor is the hardest to describe. Where you absolutely do not make fun of anyone, where you certainly do not get laughs by talking about crude underwear, where you definitely do not swear in your entire set, where I eventually came to that particular place where none of that is truly present. It's exceedingly difficult because you have to work a great deal on yourself. That's precisely why I truly value genuinely clean humor. For example, Anton Timoshenko, he skillfully delivers political humor, but it's also remarkably restrained, quite intelligently presented. And I really truly like that too, especially when the inherent purity of the genre is carefully maintained.
Was there ever a moment in your life when you wanted to quit comedy?
Yes, I've already left stand-up several times. Well, simply because I couldn't make money and I needed to earn a living. And I was given a difficult project, and I objectively understood that I wouldn't be able to both perform and write a series under such tight deadlines. And I chose money because, you see, I was living completely on my own. I truly had to support myself, pay for my rent, my food, my clothes, and so on and so forth. So I would just leave stand-up for a whole year. Then I would look at myself and think, what exactly am I doing?
What were you doing?
Well, I was writing TV series. I kept thinking, why am I even writing this? For whom? Honestly, at some point I was just completely lost. Why did I spend a whole year not doing what I love? I was already leaving the world of TV series and moving into comedy. And again, I started working for myself there, independently. And in the same way, for example, when the full-scale war started, at first we immediately left the country. I was living in Berlin at that time, and there I performed abroad at various significant events, charity concerts, specifically Good Evening, We Are From Ukraine, and other big shows, plus separate extensive comedy tours like those with Dante and Yuri Karagodin, which were very well received. There were all sorts of wonderful concerts, concert after concert, one after another. But then, when I eventually came back to my beloved Ukraine, I was so utterly crushed inside by the devastating war, by the profound depression, by the constant struggle to simply survive and so on, that I completely stopped writing stand-up comedy. I then went into producing, became a professional scriptwriter, and diligently worked for someone else entirely. And at that time, I really didn't have the strength to go out and say anything at all to other people. So I departed once again, but I returned yet again. Well, life is just so very, very, very incredibly long, and you can always come and go as you truly feel, because the overall setting is always different, and you don't always have something truly meaningful to say. It's often better to honestly step back and not go out there just for the sake of it, just telling something unclear for absolutely no reason at all, really. Talking about things you don't know, making up some jokes, sitting over them, struggling, if you have nothing to say.
Humor, when you create it, can it be a way of working through certain specific personal experiences? Pain, fears, well,
Of course, it's psychotherapy. Humor is psychotherapy. Actually, you don't have to overthink anything. You go to therapy, and in therapy you discover, for example, that you are indeed quite insecure. There you have your fundamental premise. You can readily write at least 10 full minutes of comedic material. I am truly, truly insecure. I consider myself underrated. Anything at all that you might uncover or dig up in therapy, you can certainly go and write some really good jokes about it. And with those humorous jokes, you can effectively relieve the significant tension from that particular state of yours.
Is it true that people who make others laugh are often sad inside?
Definitely not me. Well, I'm a very cheerful person. I enjoy life, I love this life, I love goofing around, I love kids, spending time with them. In general, I love laughing, I love fun company. Well, I'm a choleric type. I'm just not really that kind of a person. Although it is true that there are a lot of people who truly write jokes as if, well, something deep inside them genuinely makes them do it. So their jokes turn out funny. Perhaps that is precisely what makes it even more profoundly interesting, because they often create humor in a rather poignant way from their experiences of pain. Of course, I have really just as many of my problems inside as indeed everyone else, but I'm more of the kind of a person who sees this life as a wonderful, interesting adventure. That's why I'm interested in living and interested in coming up with something fun about this life.
Why do you really think that Ukrainians, even in such truly tragic times, still joke a great deal and keep on making jokes?
Well, that's only logical. In the most difficult times, there are even more jokes. I mean, like every day something happens and there's an explosion of memes. Not even the very next day, but this very second. For example, I distinctly remember it was truly quite funny when that drone actually flew into Polish territory, and Lachin wrote in the morning, like, damn, I just woke up and I've already missed all the drone memes, like, and I'm here in Poland, I simply can't believe it, all of these things. They say, when did you even have the time to do that? And the drone actually flew in at 3 a.m. And by 8 in the morning, there was just an unreal number of memes. So we constantly need to joke around, share jokes. Why are memes so popular right now? People want to share something funny, like to truly make someone genuinely laugh, especially if the entire experience you're living through right now isn't quite like American stand-up comedy, where they are still making jokes about the COVID-19 pandemic. Seriously, I watch the very latest shows, and I think to myself, really? We're still talking about COVID? When was that already? What COVID? Like, they generally have fewer significant global problems over there, actually, Of course, everyone has their own problems, like life and so on. But we do have a lot more important points where we can, point out that something, for example, is absurd. We often say, that's surreal, that's surreal. I mean, now Ukrainian soldiers are actively learning to effectively close the skies over Europe, even though just 3 and a bit short years ago we were all saying, please, close the sky, and that whole situation was truly surreal. And in this surreal situation, what else can you do? Write jokes about it, jokes about this surrealism, about this absurdity.
Can we say that humor often becomes a kind of cover to really avoid deep and meaningful conversations or engaging in self-reflection?
Well, I think that's true to some extent. To some extent, yes, but it truly depends on the individual person. If a person is truly ready to go further, they can even joke about very deep and profound topics. And I don't know. Some people do, of course, tend to hide behind humor. But it's always quite obvious. If you're a mature adult, you can readily tell whether someone is truly hiding right now, or if they're simply joking around, and you can still have deep, meaningful conversations together and genuinely laugh about profound things together.
Let me remind you that today in the studio of the Archetype of the Nation project, we are talking about humor with Nataly Haripova. A philosophical question. What is the power of humor?
The power of humor. The power of humor is that it truly humor divides people into those who understand it and those who don't. Humor is, in essence, after all, true humor, the kind that truly resonates and is deeply appreciated, is only genuinely possible among intellectual people, those individuals who are extensively well-read, profoundly knowledgeable, and possess a sophisticated understanding. Furthermore, humor inherently serves to divide people into distinct groups. Those who find enjoyment in more primitive, simplistic humor, and conversely, those who much prefer and truly appreciate more nuanced, intricate, and intellectually stimulating complex humor. And humor is always a reflection of one's perspective and understanding. And also humor undeniably makes life significantly better and more enjoyable for everyone. That is to say, when a person genuinely laughs, they truly feel much better and more uplifted. As the wise saying goes, hearty laughter indeed prolongs one's life, and that sentiment is profoundly true. This is because when we engage in genuine laughter, our entire physical body becomes actively engaged, even the deepest and most hidden muscles, and we experience an overwhelming sense of pure joy and well-being. Of course, a few mean-spirited jokes are present here, are out of place, but for example, when someone watches the TV show Friends and laughs, and this laughter that genuinely arises, it's truly something quite unique. It's indeed unique when a person actually laughs. Or, there are some people who watch a comedy and absolutely nothing happens to them at all. But this remarkable ability to truly laugh, to genuinely make yourself feel good because something is inherently funny and amusing to you, that's precisely what truly sets us apart from everything else. From tears. They release cortisol through tears. While laughter triggers all the programs, all the hormones, dopamine, serotonin, and so on. And it is really cool that, in fact, to really get healthier, you don't need to go to any of the health resorts. You can just go to some stand-up show or turn on a funny series like Ted Lasso with its kind, witty, intelligent humor that will definitely 100% make you feel better.
By the way, in that saying about humor prolonging life, there's actually a continuation. For those who make others laugh, it shortens it.
For those individuals who make others laugh? Well, back in those days, if you didn't make a good enough joke, they could actually feed the jester to the dogs. I truly think that's where the saying comes from. I believe that's the origin. There were those theaters, after all, where they often mocked the king and frequently did puppet shows and the like, and all of that was entirely based on humor too. And of course, those particular theaters weren't officially licensed, and if they ever got caught, they could easily end up on the gallows, facing severe consequences. Now, of course,
it's a bit easier with this.
A little easier, yes. You don't necessarily end up on the gallows.
What specific traits of Ukrainians as a people truly show up in the unique way we joke? Or in the way we laugh?
I truly think that the Ukrainians are absolutely ready to burst out laughing with joy. But if you just remember correctly, well, when you come to a village, at the social gatherings, everyone is laughing out loud, sharing hearty joy. But if you compare the fundamental mentality of Americans and Ukrainians, particularly in their inherent openness and receptiveness to humor, you will undoubtedly observe a distinct and noticeable difference. For instance, when Ukrainians arrive at a comedy show or any performance, their initial thought process often leads them to think, well, go ahead, then, truly make me laugh, genuinely surprise me with your wit and performance. It's as if someone really has to exert considerable effort and demonstrate exceptional talent to effectively break through to the person, to truly get through to their guarded emotions so that they can finally connect and engage with the humor presented. It's quite a significant journey. A person truly has to go quite a considerable distance before they even start laughing. In America, I was specifically in Los Angeles, in one of the oldest and most well-known stand-up comedy clubs, and there people come already prepared and truly ready to laugh. So even the smallest joke there is received very warmly indeed, with enthusiastic applause, genuine laughter, and people are basically always completely ready to laugh. It's exactly the same with people on the street. In America, people are constantly giving you genuine compliments, so you can just walk around and in a single day get 3 compliments for absolutely no reason at all, perhaps about your fantastic hairstyle, your stylish shoes, or something else entirely. We simply don't have that here. We're a bit closed off within ourselves. And humor is truly all about openness. When you're truly open there, you come to a show and just laugh out loud with genuine enjoyment. If you're closed off, then you come and at the very end you say, well, it was certainly funny, of course, but not absolutely everything. Or they might start saying that actually, while the initial idea was quite funny, this particular part, well, that's just not it at all, really. So, a person truly chooses for themselves whether to laugh or not to laugh. For example, I vividly remember that when I was still actively involved in the community, specifically in the stand-up comedy community, at the stand-up venue, and we performed there every single weekend, all the time, I heard the jokes, the routines from the guys who performed. Well, I heard them literally billions of times. That is to say, I heard the exact same jokes at every single show. But I had my favorite jokes there, and this time he delivered it a little differently, with a different intonation, and it was still funny to me. I mean, well, it's a funny joke, it works. It's a hook. It will be funny again, actually. So it's not just a repeated joke. A repeated joke won't be funny. If it's a joke told at the table, and your dad tells the same joke every time, then yes, it won't be funny. But if it's a comedian and the audience at the show is different, everything is different, the setting is different, then the joke still works differently each time. If you're open, you can laugh out loud.
You mentioned that at our family gatherings it's quite fun, but at concerts we truly expect to be thoroughly entertained. That really makes me think that we're more open in our own personal circle than when we're somewhere outside our circle among strangers.
People. Yeah, that's right. I think that's a trauma from the past, having to keep up appearances. You always have to keep up appearances for some reason, for someone, though it's not clear who. But when you're at home, you can just be yourself, even get drunk if you want, whatever. But in public, you have to keep up appearances. Hosha, stop drinking, that's enough, come on, 3 people are watching. But at home, Hosha can get properly drunk and then simply just crawl to bed afterwards because he's at home. It's quite a very little bit of a self-ban, really.
By the way, that's actually one of the values for Ukrainians. It's generally recognized that one of the core values is family, the household. That is, we take care of our family, family is important to us, and so within the family we can be a bit different than we are outside, a bit more open. We behave differently because here everyone is our own.
Yeah.
If there are outsiders nearby, then of course what will people say? You have to keep up appearances.
Probably, I don't know, it's not like that for me. I mean, in my family, my mom doesn't really joke, very rarely, and when I make jokes, she doesn't really get them, so I have no motivation whatsoever to joke at home when we get together. It's the same story with my brother. But friends are truly the family I've consciously and deliberately chosen, based entirely on the person I have become and who I genuinely am. They are not merely the default settings that were inherently there from the very beginning of my life. And with friends, that's precisely where I can truly and completely be myself. But the essential thing is, when you're with your closest friends, those individuals who are genuinely aligned with you in spirit and humor, you can actually be even more harsh with your jokes. Those kinds of jokes, when it's like almost as if you're performing an autopsy on a corpse. Those kinds of jokes. And you'll probably be cracking up at that, but for example, those are some really, truly, exceptionally bad jokes, you know? Let's say really dark humor. But they're your very own inside jokes. No one else can truly hear you right now. You're joking around, and it genuinely makes you feel much better, and you effectively let go of something that's been steadily building up deep inside you when it comes to dark humor. Because, well, we have a lot of darkness happening in our lives. And it's definitely something that needs to be worked through as well, but you can't joke like that with everyone.
So how do you maintain the boundary? Today we've talked about good humor and not so good humor. And so there is a certain line between good humor and mockery, for example. How do you maintain that line? And does it actually depend on the person who is making the jokes and creating the humor? Are there any recommendations?
I don't know. A good person will never mock another person. That's just how it is. That is, it's...
So it depends on a person?
Well, yes, of course. Like, a mean person will mock others. It's always like a sign of insecurity. Well, perhaps even intense anger comes right after a deep feeling of insecurity. That's it. So it just depends on the person.
Do you agree that humor is a true weapon?
Well, yes. Yes. Well, because we are constantly defending ourselves, we actively defend ourselves from the psychological disorders that can arise from such challenging circumstances, and we protect ourselves. It acts as our essential safety cushion. When the entire world is deeply worried about us, specifically about the people of Ukraine, we're able to confidently respond with something like, hey, we are still very much here, standing strong, and we've even managed to create 1 billion incredibly witty and darkly humorous jokes about those infamous drones in Poland. And what are you going to do to us? It's our safety cushion, something we can fall back on without fear, our sense of humor, which just supports us.
Is there a risk that humor could potentially turn into propaganda or even be used for specific propaganda purposes? That kind of...
Propaganda, what's so bad about it?
It depends which one.
Well, there you go. Well, propaganda, for example, there. Education. Super. Propaganda. I don't know what propaganda is. Propaganda. Propaganda from... Will they protect themselves? Super. Well, that is, any propaganda, humor will work great there. If social media advertisements effectively utilize humor, that will undoubtedly work exceptionally well. Social media advertisements that promote inclusivity with a touch of humor will also prove to be remarkably effective. Consider videos demonstrating, for example, the most appropriate ways to communicate respectfully with an individual who has a disability or with a distinguished veteran. And when combined with genuine humor, that is certainly something that will also perform very successfully. Why propaganda? Everyone is so afraid of the word propaganda, but what is propaganda really? The promotion and propaganda of the Ukrainian language within Ukraine. Almost no one currently allocates sufficient financial resources for this important endeavor, but it is undeniably something that we absolutely need to do here in Ukraine. And this is something that we most definitely and truly need to prioritize. In this propaganda, we need just the absolute basics. We truly need to engage all of the deep, intrinsic muscles inside our bodies so that they can effectively start to work. If, of course, someone genuinely takes this matter seriously.
By the way, thank you for pointing out that propaganda is a word that can have both positive and negative meanings, and it can certainly be perceived in a very positive light, and we can actively look for valuable opportunities to use propaganda for good purposes, including through humor.
Yes, of course. Well, propaganda is just a word. It's just been somewhat demonized. Because, well, I don't know, nowadays basically all content is divided into propaganda and anti-propaganda. Propaganda of Ukrainization, propaganda of living freely in your own country, and anti-propaganda against the propaganda of Russification. In other words, in reality, all content can actually be divided into these categories.
What truly and profoundly stands out to you from all the concerts that took place during the war? The recent ones in the past few years?
Well, there was indeed quite a funny concert in Zaporizhzhia. There's this particular venue there, I can't quite remember what its exact name is, but it's in a spacious basement, and that's precisely where all the exciting concerts take place. There are also lively ballroom dance competitions, some engaging cooking shows, hilarious stand-up performances, truly everything imaginable. Even significant graduation parties are frequently held in that very basement. And when there's an air raid alert in Zaporizhzhia, that basement serves as a shelter. And I had a concert, I was performing live, and people were sitting there, and at some point, though I personally didn't see it, a homeless man suddenly walked in. And Vaika, the manager, she actually said, "Sorry, but you can't come in here." But they told her, no, right now we're operating as a shelter, everyone is allowed to come in. So the homeless man came in somewhere in the middle of the concert. He sat quietly in the back, and at the very end of the concert, I then asked, "So everyone, did you thoroughly enjoy it?" And everyone was like, "Yes!" And I'm like, "Do you want me to come back here again?" And everyone was like, "Yes!" And suddenly from the back rows, like, "Stop, stop, stop. Stop!" And he's like, "Nataka, that was so effing awesome." And everyone was like, "Yes!" But of course not everyone realized there was a homeless man. And I didn't understand who it was. And then I realized it was just a homeless guy who accidentally ended up at the stand-up concert. He actually liked it. At the end, he stood up, already a bit drunk, and said he enjoyed it, and everyone supported him. Then everyone left, and he just laid down there to sleep. So our concerts in Ukraine are quite interesting during the war.
There's this term English humor. How would you accurately describe Ukrainian humor?
Well, that's quite a difficult question to answer, because in my personal opinion, we don't really have one distinct singular style of Ukrainian humor. It's incredibly diverse and multifaceted. I mean, we've seen everything from the classic Dovonosiki to the more contemporary Vasya Baidak. So throughout our history, we've had both the iconic gentleman show and many other comedic performances. Just like, for example, those truly popular singing sessions. Kativi Veselya, Tosti Veselya, Did Panas, and Anton Timoshenko. All of that, without a doubt, genuinely represents authentic and vibrant Ukrainian humor. Pritula and Diesel Show are also very well-known and prominent examples of contemporary Ukrainian humor. So it's truly quite hard to single out just one specific thing or particular aspect from all of these wonderful examples.
Well, are there, for example, jokes that Ukrainians will definitely laugh at, but foreigners definitely won't? Well,
right now, most of the jokes are about the war, of course, about how we're, like, living through it there. For example, when I was the producer of the television show Vidvalny, Legs Off, we included some really quite harsh and rather pointed jokes about missing legs. And that's something that really, truly only we can genuinely laugh at, you know. Well, first of all, the people who are actually going through this themselves, it was primarily and specifically for them, because they can genuinely and truly laugh about it. Well, basically, we can easily understand precisely why these particular jokes are truly needed here. There, I genuinely think it would look really quite strange.
And what if we look at an earlier period? I mean, is there really something in our culture that's perhaps just funny to us but not funny to them?
I don't know, because I find it really, really funny. Like Wodehouse, I find him really quite funny, and that's not even about our current time, for example, but rather about England, and it is genuinely funny. Maybe if we carefully translated our specific jokes for them, we just need to do a pure, straightforward experiment, like show them our particular jokes and then see if they find them genuinely funny or not. Because, for example, there are certain jokes like those from Carlin, George Carlin, he's truly funny across the ages. All of his thoughts, they're all still so very much relevant. It's just that they're harsh truths about all those things that people later started to tolerate or smooth over and so on. He spoke out much more harshly about racism and chauvinism and wars and everything. And I truly don't know. I can genuinely say that I find many foreign comedians quite funny and entertaining, but whether they'll find us equally funny or indeed whether we'll be genuinely humorous to them, I honestly don't know. By the way, the talented Anton Timoshenko recently performed in English, and he spoke eloquently about the ongoing war, and the audience gave a really, truly great and enthusiastic response. I think that basically, if it's genuinely funny, then it's indeed funny.
And how do you see the future of Ukrainian humor? Considering that, for example, we now have the established concept of English humor, do you truly think that in due time we'll be able to create this unique Ukrainian humor that will be recognized and appreciated all over the entire world?
Well, of course, I would really truly like that very much. But actually, if you think about it more globally, is there, for example, such a thing as distinct French humor, perhaps? Greek humor? Or I don't know. No, I get it. For example, I just thought of Moldovan humor. They have these humorous stories, the Moldovans, and they're kind of like anecdotes. Whether Moldovan humorous stories would be funny abroad, I don't know. However, if our unique stand-up comedy truly reaches the expansive world stage and subsequently gets skillfully translated into, for instance, the English language, then without a shadow of a doubt, it could absolutely be funny to international audiences, 100% beyond any question. Because, for example, sometimes I meticulously write some jokes, and then, I already have 3 or even 4 full-length comedy shows carefully written and prepared. And later, when I look at them and review them, I often notice there's some significant overlap with another show that also recently got released, and if it's genuinely funny for the audience, then our material would undoubtedly be funny too. Just to reach that particular level it's very, very difficult for us, because there still isn't a significant amount of demand from foreigners for Ukrainian humor at this particular moment. For example, let's say if Ukrainian films pop up on an online streaming service like Netflix, like Luxembourg, they get dubbed, adapted into different languages. And that's already cool, because I don't think they can understand all the jokes that are happening there. And in general, it's very interesting what foreigners think about this film, because it's a very Ukrainian film. And the jokes in it are very Ukrainian too. And honestly, I would be really interested to hear foreigners listen to our Ukrainian shows, to hear what they would say about them. That really is interesting.
Here we're talking about the fact that humor is part of our identity, essentially one of our defining traits. What will happen to us if we suddenly stop joking and laughing?
We'll all get sick.
Well, wait, what will we do?
Sad all the time. Well, first of all, it would be terrible, boring, and just pointless. That's not the kind of life we have. Sad.
Which is better if we take the extremes? A complete lack of humor or constant joking? Jokes, constant joking. Better
to have constant jokes. They're dumb, but sometimes they'll be okay. And the absence of it is just pure sadness.
You've probably heard of this kind of folklore genre. Today you are talking about songs, and you've probably also heard of another folklore genre called nebelitsi. These are stories that are a bit absurd, a bit exaggerated. If you were to compare stand-up comedy to a folklore genre, which one do you think it is most closely related to?
Well, I genuinely don't believe it's nonsense at all, not really, because ultimately it is still fundamentally about real life and the experiences we all share. That is, it's about what actually happens to me. But for example, Vasya Baidak has a lot of incredibly exaggerated, often quite deliberately made up, and sometimes even wildly embellished content. Absurd humor? So maybe that's where the nonsense is. That could be something similar.
We have something like that too. Probably it is also a part of our folklore called games at wakes. Have you heard of it? It's a tradition in Western Ukraine. And it's literally games at wakes, meaning that when there is a deceased person in the house or perhaps somewhere in the yard, there are usually young children nearby, or young people, not necessarily from this particular family but from another. They might play various different games. Why is that? That's an interesting question. Actually, it's really a way to turn fear into laughter. So, to somehow help the family get through this loss, these games at wakes would take place. I actually wanted to ask you, how would you explain the role of laughter and these kinds of jokes? Games, well, like very simple and straightforward ones. I mean, it could easily be something engaging like a classic game of tag, or perhaps some kind of interactive twister from back then, or even just sharing amusing jokes and interesting anecdotes, truly anything at all that brings people together.
Freeze tag. No, well, Probably, I honestly don't really know. It's actually truly quite hard for me to fully imagine that particular scenario. For me, like when I've been to funerals before and I really liked it when at some point during the service everything gradually shifts to people sharing funny stories and fond memories about that person who has passed away. They hold on to some memories, the truly funny ones. And then, once, my dear friend Lesha, unfortunately, passed away, and at his solemn funeral there were approximately 200 people present, all quite young, because he himself died at a very young age. But he had truly managed to do so many incredibly funny and memorable things that from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 11 o'clock at night, we just went one after another. People just kept taking the microphone. There was a dedicated green room and everyone just laughed and shared stories the entire day long. And I could really see that his mother, well, she actually felt better that day and it supported her because it was so much about him. Like all these stories said so much about him.
Is it possible to take topics for stand-up from folklore? And if so, which ones would you choose?
Well, yes, of course you can, for example, classic fairy tales or well-known sayings. Like, you can analyze them, like, for example, the saying three mushrooms on a spoon. How did this saying come about? 3 mushrooms is a lot, but 2 is just right. And what kind of mushrooms are these? So what is this about? So you can really dig into all these stories about fairy tales, how strange those tales were, that it was always someone had to die in that fairy tale. And now when I lovingly read fairy tales to my daughter Polina, I don't read the specific ones that were read to me as a young child. Because, unfortunately, when I was a child, I was read Russian folk tales. And there were these Yemelya actually buried his 2 brothers in the ice hole, the white ones. So it's all about killing, killing, killing. Although basically in all fairy tales, for example, you see there is often a lot of violence. Masha lived with her loving grandmother and caring grandfather because she unfortunately didn't have a mom or a dad. They were childless, so they lovingly had Thumbelina. And all these classic fairy tales are built on profound tragedy. So of course you can certainly use this in your stand-up comedy. I don't necessarily read fairy tales to my child because, just look, you take this fairy tale and start unraveling it, translating it into your own life.
Another of our folk traditions is mocking our enemies, which is still relevant today. What is that about?
Humiliation. You laugh while humiliating them, like you put yourself above them because you're laughing at them. It's actually very effective.
In the context of folklore, let's recall such a genre as the anecdote from Soviet times. And so, during the Soviet era, the anecdote was very popular. Now, well, at least in my opinion, it's not such a popular genre anymore. You don't hear a lot of anecdotes these days. Why do you think that is?
The traditional form is quite outdated and rather straightforward, and people have simply grown bored of it. Like, you know, a typical Pole, an American individual, and someone else entirely meet up. That's just not interesting anymore. Plus, even the anecdotes themselves were still predominantly Soviet in their fundamental nature at that particular time. They made fun of the Soviet way of life. I mean, everyone lived together in close quarters, so the daughter-in-law truly hated the mother-in-law, the mother-in-law absolutely hated the other mother-in-law, the mother-in-law intensely hated the son-in-law, and so on and so forth. All the men drank excessively, all the women constantly chased after clothes, because there was basically only one kind of clothing available for the entire country. And that was what they made fun of. Now everything is completely different. And basically nowadays anecdotes have turned into memes. Now, memes have everything in them, and they have absurdity, tempo, and rhythm, and a short form, which, in principle, is now generally accepted. I mean, nowadays, no one just sits there and, goes around in circles 3 times over the same old stuff. So, what kind of punchline should there be at the end? Like, if a person tells a joke for 5 minutes. Well, and not everyone knows how to tell jokes, but we just took it and forwarded it. It's already a ready-made visual form. And it's much easier.
There's this really quite interesting idea that, in general, folklore works all tend to get compressed over time. That is to say, once upon a time, for example, these could have been fables. Fables later became jokes. And now we don't have time for anything at all. Everything is very fast. So now it's already something special. It has been compressed into memes or into some slightly earlier forms, not funny but also short, proverbs and sayings.
Well, yes. Well, although the interview format still exists.
Yes, and that's very good, because we have the opportunity to talk, and then people can watch us, listen, and write their own thoughts in the comments. It's a wonderful opportunity that modern technology gives us today. Another question is also about humor and about power. Also in the context of those jokes which used to be mostly about those in power. When we make jokes about politicians, is it a sign of democracy and freedom of speech? Or is it an expression of distrust or dislike towards those in power?
Well, it can be both, of course. But if there are no such jokes, then you can already say that there's a regime of that kind in the country. That's all there is to it. I mean, why was there such an uproar when the late-night show was shut down 2 weeks ago in America? Because that's already a warning sign of a totalitarian regime. And that's very frightening. Because as long as there is freedom of speech, we can still get something across, change things, and build the real country we dream of living in, so that our children can live here and so on. So, in principle, the fact that we are here right now is a sign of that. It means we dream about the future and want to stay here. But if we truly can't change anything here, if that is the case, if we unfortunately become completely mired in widespread corruption and our fundamental freedom of speech completely disappears, then many concerned people will undoubtedly choose to leave, because we all deeply desire for our children to live in a truly free country.
But here, on the one hand, there are public jokes, like on late-night shows, right? And then there are the jokes told in kitchens, like it was in Soviet times when you could get arrested for a joke, but still everyone joked in their kitchens and somehow passed these jokes on to each other. And accordingly, these jokes about the authorities existed. So here another question arises. If people actually don't make jokes about politicians, if they don't joke themselves, does that mean that the politician or government official is genuinely liked?
I don't even really know, for me personally, since I very rarely go to other social circles or groups. It's quite hard for me to even truly understand whether people actually talk about politicians in their own kitchens. Because we practically don't talk about politics. Because we talk about things we can actually change. In other words, you can invest your energy where it matters, but when you can't change anything, it's as if it's not even discussed. I don't know. Well, jokes and anecdotes about politicians are definitely absent in our community. I don't know. I really don't know. Well, if you gather a big community of taxi drivers, I think they'll definitely have something to talk and complain about.
To wrap up, a quick blitz interview.
Yes.
7 rather short questions and truly 7 short or not so short answers indeed. What trait do you value most in people?
Kindness.
Which do you consider the worst?
Envy.
What inspires you?
Everything beautiful. I am deeply inspired by the profound essence of love, by the breathtaking beauty of nature, and by the intricate tapestry of people's genuine feelings. I am truly inspired by devotion, profound friendship, and the boundless world of art. That truly includes everything. From the intricate melodies of music and the vibrant strokes of painting to every other creative expression related to art, all of these deeply inspire me. I can draw from it endlessly.
And what scares you?
Well, war truly scares me. Death genuinely scares me. And the death of my beloved loved ones deeply scares me. I am truly afraid of not seeing a bright and promising future for our country.
What helped you hold on during the difficult moments in your life?
A sense of humor and deep meditation.
What is the main goal or mission of your life?
It's certainly really hard to say what my main mission is, but it seems to me that so far everything that I do in the flow state, where both space and time seem to disappear for me completely and so on, where I can truly give humor, share truly valuable insights that have been profoundly transformed within me and so on, and make people genuinely happier, even if just for a brief moment in their lives. That, I truly think, is my ultimate mission.
If you had to choose just 3 words that truly describe the Ukrainian people, what would they actually be?
Strong, truly daring, and exceptionally cheerful, consistently and remarkably.
Thank you so much for coming and for the interesting conversation. Wishing you success.
Thank you very much as well. All the best.
Friends, today in our studio we had Nataly Haripova, stand-up comedian, screenwriter and producer. Write in the comments what interesting things you learned for yourself. Do you think that a sense of humor is one of the important values inherent to our people? Let me remind you that you can watch episodes of the Archetype of the Nation project on YouTube, listen on your favorite podcast platforms, and read on the website magicworld.com.ua. In particular, there you will find popular science essays prepared by folklorist Marina Demeduk, as well as recordings of folklore works performed by well-known actors. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.